Controlling happiness. To control happiness, you need to know one thing. Happiness is control, or better said, happiness is a perceived gradual increase of your control over the world around you. Now, to understand this fully, let us break this down a bit. Firstly, let us look at the words gradual increase. What this means in a nutshell is that happiness is not a static thing. It is not a point or achievement or a perpetual static state. The desire to ever increase our control over our environment, our surroundings, ourselves, and our lives is the core drive of our existence. Even more fundamental than what is typically called the basic animal instincts. Even these are driven by this single desire. You need food, control your environment to achieve this. Long after animal urges have been satisfied, we still aim to improve our mastery of our surroundings. There is no point that you can reach where you will be satisfied in the long term, as what we perceive as happiness is achieved by a perceived improvement, be it short or long term. The goalposts will always keep moving because the goal is to keep on improving. Now let us look at the word control, because this term is a lot broader than most people would at first suspect and encompasses within it all human action, be it perceived as negative or positive. From the day we are born, we attempt to control the world around us by whatever means necessary. Babies cry to get what they want, toddlers will throw tantrums, manipulate and act up if they think it will get them what they want. Small children's first use of their new mental and physical abilities is to try and have the biggest impact on the world around them, increase their control of their environment. Selfish and negative traits are mostly the first to appear, as these are the easiest and have the seemingly biggest impact, so are perceived as increases in control. Destroying things, selfish acts, reckless abandon, continually testing the patience of their parents, the boundaries of their freedom. All are driven by the need to have an impact on their environment. Even if their reaction is negative, it is a reaction they can seemingly control. Through their actions, they can influence those around them. To guide the child into understanding that the easy and superficial efforts they use to try and increase their so-called control of their surroundings are not in their best interest, and that higher and positive behavior allows for ultimately greater control, you need only one thing: consistency. Not discipline driven by emotions and mood, but clear-cut reactions to specific situations, with consequences independent of the mood of the guardian. Why has the topic now drifted towards young children? Because this is where our understanding of control is largely formed. We live and breathe what our guardians show us, what we experience from those who come into contact with. It is not enough for them to tell us what to do. We have to live it, see it work, and see its consequences. Here there is no good or bad in a moral sense, just effective and ineffective examples of people showing how they control their surroundings and what happens to them. One of the most potent sources of perceived control is the control of other individuals. Being able to influence the life of another is the quickest way to perceive that we have control over our own lives. This is unfortunately one of the major sources of misery in our existence. Because the idea of control can take so many varied forms, so too does happiness and contentedness, or satisfaction if you want to call it by other names. We don't need to be able to change the world, but as long as we can control some element of it and gradually increase that control over time, we can be continually happy. Be it ever-increasing material wealth, greater influence, positive or negative, over others, increased self-control, or innumerable other little ways to influence the world around us. This is why children of millionaires can be miserable and impoverished farmers can be happy. There is no fixed state, just a perception of an improvement. No matter how good we supposedly have it, if we perceive our control as stagnant or worse reducing, we will be miserable, depressed, etc. This is the reason for the massive amount of self-medication that goes on nowadays. This is a direct way for us to control our happiness, even only if in a short term, by using chemicals to induce this state. Here we can also explain the reason for the seeming acceptance of the hangover or low after the high or rush. It may be a much higher price than the high itself, but again it is something that you indirectly controlled. You chose to seek the high/rush, so accept the low, but this was something that you could control, and therein lies the crux. Many people who appear in control are still up against the same issue as everybody else. They are driven to increase control, as it is the increase that brings satisfaction, not the state. And at the upper end of control of material and people, the feeling of an increase starts to grow out of all proportion. No wonder many of the most perverse and odd human depravities are undertaken by those in stagnant positions of power, as they crave these acts to perceive that they are still increasing their control, be it morally good or bad. So this is all bad then? Of course not. It is what defines us. And given our complex history, one thing has shown itself over time. Morally good and decent decisions and interactions are more effective in increasing everyone's control over their environment than what is perceived as immoral or bad. If this was not the case, then we would not have arrived at the place we are today, one that is innumerably better than anything we have had at any time in our past. Control, or seeking to increase control, is not inherently a desire to have power over others. Even altruistic actions or voluntary submission can be acts of control. Helping others can be viewed as having a degree of control over others. You are directly impacting their lives with your actions. Even serving another can be viewed as an act of control, as every relationship, even master and slave, is a relationship with roles and expectations. People can gradually gain greater control over every kind of situation. Similarly, though, they can also lose control of any situation. This is also why people can recover from the lowest low and fall from the highest highs. It is the increase and decrease in perceived control that is key, not the state itself. Nature provides us with a normal progression of increased control to a large extent. We gain control as we grow from a child into an adult and gain independence. Increased skills, abilities, relationships, and ultimately children are all outlets for a perception of increased control. Ideally, as we age, increased material wealth and hopefully wise guidance of others increases our feelings of control into old age. Things like empty nest syndrome and many of the negative attitudes and manipulations we see in older citizens are a direct result of some perception of decreased control and attempts by individuals to gain control over other areas of their life through whatever means. It is important to remember that the perception of control is a cumulative, subconscious, and above all, subjective calculation. People weigh up the value of controlling different parts of their lives differently, so a loss of one may be felt differently to another who derives their whole self-worth from this one element. This also explains the extreme and varied reactions and behaviors people have when institutions or behaviors are attacked that they project their sense of self-worth, i.e. control, into. Oh yes, self-worth is tied to our perception of control. It is tied to happiness, and yes, we all too easily can project our sense of control into institutions and ideologies, because ideas are control too. People will follow bad ideas to the death if they believe in their heart that it is the source of their control over their lives. There is no unreasonable or unfathomable action. These are humans like you and I. Their evaluation of their control over their lives and their sense of self-worth are quite logical for them. There is nothing more dangerous than young men who perceive they have no future, no control over their lives, and a handy ideology that not only promises the answer, but at least superficially projects a sense of being able to control parts of their lives, even if it is only controlling others through force and intimidation. So there you have it. Being born rich can actually be a curse, as perceived stagnation or loss of influence, material wealth, etc. will induce a depression by default. You're actually better off starting with little and gradually increasing over your life. Depressingly simple from a materialistic point of view. But a final thought. Spiritually, this is also the key to happiness. There is no piece of knowledge or technique you can attain or do once that will induce perpetual bliss. There is no single unchanging state that you can reach that will guarantee happiness. This state is the journey. This state is the desire to improve, perpetual improvement, self-discipline, self-control, the act of living and breathing these techniques all the time, which allow you to be wise, kind, aware, alert, responsive, and immune against any petty criticism or attacks and their subsequent negative thoughts. That is the only guaranteed happiness that no one can take away from you. For many, the word control is grouped together with negative definitions such as for the word manipulation, instead of those more appropriate words such as security, guidance, and direction. This tainted perception of control may make it quite difficult to fully understand what is being said above. best way to get through this is to ask me to explain, greater detail, some general scenario or concept in terms of control that is important to you. I will gladly do this as long as the scenario is not too specific. As perceived happiness, control, is a cumulative thing, I can only speculate as to general trends and causes which would apply for the majority of similar cases. Let me know, and all the best.